Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Nature Folklore Sessions. It's the 11th of July, 2021. Well, thank you for joining me. This is our weekly time of exploring nature-centered folklore, connecting this within your favorite sanctuary space and expressing your inspired visions from that sanctuary through your poetry, writing, art, craft, performance, and especially problem solving, which I've been doing a fair bit of. But this afternoon, it's a real special nature folklore. Great session dedicated to the recent release of Sacred Actions, Living the Wheel of the Year Through Earth-Centered Sustainable Practice. And there's the cover. It should come up. There you go. And this is by Dana O'Driscoll, who you may well be familiar with for a wonderful, generous Druid Gardens blog. Now, these are Nature's Folklore Sessions and the Caracrory Labyrinth Gardens here. They're brought to you largely due to our subscribers, our generous, lovely Patreon subscribers, and some are going to be watching live today. Some are already watching live, so thank you for your continued support, because without it, I wouldn't be here this afternoon hosting this. And anyway, let's see who has actually joined us today. This is the exciting part, seeing people come here. Yeah, I can find you. Shell's here, Shell Gutch. Lovely to see you. Good day, John and Daniel. Really looking forward to today's session. And Alan from Kildare, who has been very eager about this. He hasn't stopped trying to phone me up all morning about it. So welcome aboard, Alan. And Bridget Rivers, good morning from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And our lovely regular and sponsor Donna Johnson is here as well. Good morning to you, Donna. You're going to absolutely love this today. So that's absolutely fabulous. So thank you, everyone who's coming on board, joining us. And you're going to have fun with this, I'm absolutely sure. Now, a lot of people, they're kind of teaching the Celtic wheel, and there's Dana's interpretation of it, beautiful with the trees there. And the 8 times of observance during every solar year. And for many people, especially those connected to nature folklore, these 8 points of the year are times of rituals and spiritual practice, because this is how our seasons flow. In Ireland, we pay a lot of attention to the cross-quarter times, Imbolc, Beltane, Lunasadh, and so on. But more north of us, north of Scotland, maybe into Scandinavia, over Canada, Alaska, the 2 solstices and the 2 equinoxes are much more defined for them. And naturally, they're honored more by the people there. But let's not forgetting that there's the procession of equinoxes to pay attention. I don't know how many people of you are familiar with this, but you might see, and Dana's done it on her description, we've kind of fallen into the Gregorian calendar. So, well, actually the Gregorian calendar had different dates originally, but we've thrown everything to the first of the month, such as Bridget's Day, Imbolc, 1st of February, and so forth, 1st of August, say, for Lunasadh. But the progression of equinoxes, if you've not studied it, is fascinating, because it's all based on the moment the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, crosses over the equator. You can see the 2 lines there. And where it crosses is different every year. It's a little bit further back. It's a degree or so. And it takes, well, not even a degree. It takes something like 25,500 years for the moon to cross the point of equator that it's done before. So that's the great year. Fascinating study, but that's not the session today. So I will move on from that. So these days, the Celtic wheel teachers, they've merged the Norse observations with our cross-quarter ones, and we get our Celtic year of 8 points of ritual and sacred actions in between. But what I'm looking forward to sharing with you this afternoon is applying those observations with what we talk about in the Nature Folklore sessions, and this is something that Dana's come up with, because there's that challenge that pagans and earth-based spiritual practitioners face, integrating sustainable lives. And this is what I love about what we're going to be talking about today, because there's a lot of practices, a lot of rituals and ceremony, but how much of that is actually related to you going away and getting your hands into the ground and doing stuff with the land, actually doing something. So the ritual is actually part of your process of land care. And this is what we're really going to focus on today. Applying, if the picture had come up, observance to gardening, permaculture, forestry care, wildlife care, our food, shelter, health care. And the fabulous way to do this is through Dana's recent release, Sacred Actions, Living the Wheel of the Year. And with Dana here, and I love this picture, she has it as a profile pic, we'll get the beautiful interpretation of the 8 chapters of her superb book. And each chapter beautifully observes a point of the year, and it presents very practical, sustainable lifestyle suggestions, and a picture here, and matches our, as I said, I've already had that, haven't I? Matches our spirituality. Now, what I'm going to do with Dana is select a favorite section from each one of the generous chapters in the book. And I've got the book here, if I can get it in the camera. Generous chapters, they really are. And let Dana serve you with an introduction and additional thoughts. But first, we need to invite Dana in. She's in the back, patiently waiting there in the sort of back room, virtual back room. So I'm going to get my earphones on, and we'll bring Dana to greet you. So we'll all say hello to Dana here. Let's get, well, that isn't Dana. I pressed the wrong button. So hello, Dana. Here we go. Good morning to you. And I think you're still loud and clear. You're certainly very visible.
Great, great. I do warn you, I have some roaming geese, which you just saw in that photo. So if you hear some honking...
Yes, I was going to talk about that. But Dana, to everybody out there, Dana will be very, you'll be very familiar to, well known to you through her very generous Druid Gardens blog. And that's how the website looks like. And Dana is a Druid graduate of the Order of Bards, Ovate and Druids. She's and there she is being beautifully druidy as part of a membership of that. And she's a certified permaculture designer through the Sirius Eco Community, Massachusetts. She's a certified permaculture teacher through Omega, New York State. A graduate of Jim McDonald's 4 Seasons Herb Course, and works a beautiful 5-acre homestead with a partner, Rob. And as she's just said, amongst a load of geese and other birds, a few cats, and even a tortoise. And there's the tortoise. And that's all that. Dana is a professional professor of English and writing and director too at Indiana University, Pennsylvania now. And she, accompanying her, being a prolific bard and writer, there's a tarot of trees, and I have to show a few pictures of that if they'll come up. Yes, they're very, very slow to come up. There we go. Beautifully done, the tarot of trees there. And she also has the Plant Spirit Oracle divination sets as well. And then amongst all that, Dana has miraculously found time to write this amazing Sacred Actions book. And I see that even a week ago, Dana also managed to slip away on a kayaking trip, a kayaking adventure. And so, it's amazing that after being able to introduce all those wonderful adventures, that we still actually have time this afternoon to feature Dana to talk about her book. So excuse, I think it's a worthy long introduction. So that's the book, again, Sacred Actions, Living the Wheel of the Year through Earth centered sustainable practices. And lovely that we got you here. Now, before getting into any of these wonderful chapters, I would love to start with what you describe as the 3 principles of sacred action. Because when I opened your book and saw that instantly, I knew that we must invite you to Nature Folklore, because this is so in tune into the heart of the land on how introduce subjects here on Nature Folklore. And I put those up because your 3 principles here, and there we go, the principles of sacred action, sort of covering the screen. Draw together wisdom from heart and mind, walking in harmony and care with the land, transforming lives, landscapes, and communities. So first, I'd love to hear your thoughts on those principles, Dana.
Sure. So if I could kind of just take them one at a time. Drawing together wisdom from the heart and the mind. I mean, in OBOD, right, we think about heart to heart, hand to hand, right? And we do the same thing in AODA. We really think about the relationship between our inner and outer selves, between our minds and our hearts and our actions. And so I really wanted to attend to the heart. And I talk about this more in the chapter on care and ethics of care, because our modern civilization has essentially stripped the idea that we have hearts and that we have care from our society. And a lot of what we do and a lot of what we think about is all embedded in our minds. Like, you know, when I go to work every day, I'm in my mind, I'm not even in my body. And so bringing those pieces together for a holistic whole is really important. The second one, walking in harmony and care with the land. So this is sort of, in my perspective, one of the most important things we can do. Again, you know, we've sort of are at the end of, you know, these long, here in North America, you know, we're talking about 3.5 centuries of colonialization where we've disconnected ourselves entirely from the land and from the wisdom of the land, and learning how to come back to that place in balance and in care, and recognizing that we can be a force of good, and nurturing the land is really important. And that leads to the third piece. So we start with ourselves and aligning our hearts and our minds. We move to the land, and then we bring that to our communities and our livelihoods and our everyday life. So to me, this is essentially articulating a powerful vision, not only for today, but for the future generations, for how can we become good ancestors? How can we create a world that our children and grandchildren want to live in? So that's a brief introduction to the principles.
Wonderful, because what I would like to do, as I hinted before, is actually go through your 8 chapters. And I'm going to be picking out a favorite section that I got there and go into it a bit more, because it's so down to earth. Yeah. And it's, you know, I started reading it. There was things, I'm familiar with that. And bang, you're into some deep instruction that makes the whole thing very valuable. But as I mentioned, Dana's book here, it is Celtic Wheel. And the first chapter, she starts it with the winter solstice. And I call that the grand conception time, which regulars to Nature Folklore will understand why I say that. But as we're in July, earliest July, I suppose, the last Celtic observance at this time was summer solstice. So I'd like us to commence from there, if that's okay with you, Dana. So everyone, we're going to kick off with chapter 5, summer solstice, food and nourishment. And favorite sort of section of this is concerned with local sustainability and seasonal diets. And I love the concept you mentioned about being a locavore. I haven't really come across that before. Locavores living on local food reared or grown within 100 miles. And doing a Google search, I found there were someone actually called themselves Locavore Box Delivery Service. And there they go, off with a box of vegetables somewhere. And there's even a Locavore magazine. And I think one of the funniest things was I saw one reference to Locavore being slow, sustainable eating, and another one said it was distributing hyper-local food. I thought that was funny. So I love how being a locavore, it's a lovely, it's cliche-ish, but it's a lovely branding, I think, just aside. A great way to describe changing culture and lifestyle. As you mentioned, you do put an emphasis on the comparison between industrial growing to a mosaic of sustainable regenerative production. And I think that's very much still the way in Russia, from what I understand. And this, surprisingly, is from a bunch of Russian people doing just that. So your quick thoughts about being a locavore, Dana?
So if we're thinking about how do we align ourselves back with our own ecosystem, and how do we align ourselves back with, more traditional ways of understanding and being in the world, industrial food and the industrialization process is one of the most damaging, stripping things that we have today. We look at everything from industrial beef production to, I literally live around a sea of cornfields here in Western Pennsylvania, and those cornfields are sprayed 4 to 6 times a year, and who knows where that corn goes. And so finding ways of realigning ourselves with what is actually growing outside and what is actually growing. And that doesn't mean you have to grow it yourself. Like maybe that's a choice you make, or maybe you choose to grow something. But finding ways of bringing a locally based diet that's grown in sustainable and regenerative ways. Go to your farmer's market. Some of the stuff is it's been around for a while, but these things are only now starting to catch on. And seeing, one of the things that I like to think about is, how do I support the local farmers in my community that are building ecosystems, that are doing regenerative farming? Like, for example, we eat beef from a farmer who's doing carbon sinking. So our beef is actually carbon neutral, because she's rotating her pastures in such a way that every time the grass is grazed, it sinks carbon, which is just really cool. So it's not that you can't have the diet you want. You just want to think about, how do I align this? And then suddenly your food becomes sacred. Your food, and that's another part of this chapter that I really love, is this idea that then when I'm having a feast and I'm putting it here before me, and I'm having it for Samhain or Lunasadh or whatever, suddenly that feast has been grown in a respectful, sacred, and reverent way. And then I can honor that food, and I can honor the folks who grew it. And I know the folks who grew it. So the whole thing is just really realigning us really in a hyper-local way, which is really important. If we're going to create a world that we want our future generations to live in, I really think that's the everyday thing, that eating has to be part of that.
Excuse me. Brilliant. Well, I've got about 10 posts here by Nuala, who's very excited by this whole afternoon and being here. Lovely, Nuala. Thanks for the enthusiasm. Brilliant. And Kate said, I did put the link up to the website. I'll keep putting that up, and the Facebook page. And whatever we can, we'll talk about the book and how to get hold of it later on. So thank you, Kate, for asking that. Mary Lee, can't wait for the book to get here. You can get it, and we'll explain how and why very soon to you, Mary. No problem with that at all. Kimberly, good morning from Massachusetts, and Sherry's here. Great. The session's recorded. She's reminding someone. Tina's here. Lovely. Hello, Dana, from Tina, and she's from Leitrim. And can we watch later? Yes, you can if you're going to sleep. Most people are watching later, I must admit. Look at last week. We had about a dozen of us here, didn't we, last week? And it's had 2,000 views. So that's the way it goes. So Sherry's good morning. And from Leah G coming in from YouTube there. That's lovely. So thank you all again. Now I'm going to go on to the next chapter here. Which is the one coming up, Chapter 6, Lunasadh, Landscape Gardens and Lawn Liberations. This was quite a surprise to me. And Beyond the Lawn, I definitely had to go into Beyond the Lawn here, because when we think of Lunasadh here, we may think of the first spreads, we think of the first harvest and the first grains, and it's the time of harvesting the first sustainable foods for winter, such as beans. And that came up too soon, but the last few hundred years, it's been the first potatoes. And a lovely basket by Kate Burrows there, I think, a local person. And we also have garland rituals and bilberry picking rituals. Bilberry is a lovely one with the wild blueberries that we have here on the hills immediately around here. And there's a lovely picture with the bilberry. I was sent out to do that because we used to get pocket money because there was a local jam factory that used to make jam for the British RAF to help them with night vision. But so that's anyway, I'm talking about other Lunasadh rituals that have sadly been fading away. They were active when I was a child, but they're gone, and they're still referred to in churches. Our local village has a sports day with a dog show and baby show, but I'm going to explain all that in about 2 Sundays' time. But Dana, in your Lunasadh chapter, you do focus on community and friendship gardening, but more profound to me was this section, be on the lawn. Very important. Yeah. Again, as I say, when I thought about it, I thought, yeah, this isn't the Lunasadh, I know. And then I realized that if you're thinking about a garden for next year, this is the time when you're going to be looking at your lawn. You're already fed up with mowing it. What the heck am I going to do to that? Let's get a bit more eco with this. Let's start planning. So yes, great time. Lunasadh is a great time to be serious about your lawn and do something productive. And I love your opener, if I can remember quoting it. A couple of years ago, I decided that mowing the front lawn violated my spiritual principles. I can understand that because it reminded me of stuff I went through when I lived in the USA, and I know others are still going through this, where neighbors started complaining about the rewilding of your lawn, and then soon the local clipboard man, it was never a woman, it was always the clipboard man arrives and says, you can't have your lawn like that, you can't have the grass, and threatens to fine you a load of money unless you cut your lawn below a certain height to keep the neighbors happy and be within local laws. And then you go on in the next chapter expressing how lawn is still an iconic symbol in the USA. And you remind us that this comes from 17th and 18th century England, where a neat lawn was a status symbol, a very potent status symbol. So the race was on during the 19th century to invent perfect lawnmower. And if my computer behave, I got some lovely pictures. Something I was very surprised when I looked this up, that Victorian lawnmowers, they're always advertised as being pushed by women. There's a couple of adverts of Victorian. How did that come on? And there's one advert for a lawnmower, the King and the Prince one. But when it came to ride-on mowers, guess what? There's the man on the ride-on lawn in Victorian times. Excuse me. Now later, I loved it by saying by 1938 there was a new USA mandate to do a 40-hour work week, which seems absolutely wonderful within human rights. But that was to ensure people had time to cut and care for their lawns. I cracked up when you pointed that out. Now here in Karakuroi, where I am, village of Cage, we actually, I don't dare put pictures up for this because if it gets around, I'll be damned forever. But the local priest, he's got this half-acre lawn, and it's got highly spiritual Marian figure on it, as you can imagine. Now I have approached him and suggest he offered his lawn space to be a community garden plot, but he wasn't very keen on that when I talked to him about it. But in this section, you also mention the challenges of forming alliances with people around you who are eager to convert their lawns into gardens. Now, I just read, I can't remember, it's the local paper of Orlando in Florida, and I only read this this morning, in fact. I can't remember the names, but there's this lovely couple. Look at that. They've got a garden in their front lawn, and they have since had veggies, but they were forever getting approached and demoralized by the local clipboard man. So they actually managed to get a class action together, and somehow it went through the courts or whatever. And there was a ruling, as from 1st of July this year, under Florida law, people can't be pestered about their lawns in their front gardens if they're wanting to use the lawns for growing food. That's now just come into law. Wonderful advancement, and absolutely fabulous. So great applause to whoever they are, because when I was in Florida, this was a nightmare. So your thoughts on transforming lawns Dana.
Yeah.
And for some reason, my screen has made you disappear. Oh, there we go. You've disappeared again. Sorry about this. I have been playing with tech issues. Yes, your thoughts on transforming lawns and lawn culture.
Sure. I mean, again, like if we're thinking about what is going to have a long-term impact on the earth and on the earth that we hold sacred, lawn is so we have food. Okay, that's every day. We eat every day. You eat 3 meals a day. And then there's the lawn. So even in just in the US alone, we have 40 million acres that are currently lawns, a lot of which are subject to pesticide use. They're subject to, lawn mowing, and that's fossil fuel use. I mean, it's just not a good practice. And so thinking about even small ways that you can transition from some place that is a consumptive space to a productive space, and then take it a step further and make it a sacred space, that's a really, really powerful tool that you can use. Suddenly you have a garden that is gorgeous, that is bringing insects in and hummingbirds and producing food and medicine for you, and maybe some spiritual supplies, which we'll talk about when we get to Samhain. And that is so easy to do. Anybody can do it, even if you have a patio. And I talked about in the book different ways of building in sacred rituals, bringing that into part of your season. But even if you're living in an apartment, you can do aquaponic gardening. You can do there's a way for every person to grow something. And I think that when you start trying to do this lawn stuff, though, part of why I provided some of the history and my own story is because there's definitely ways of doing it in a way that angers your neighbors and gets you fines. And I've been there, and it's hard. And I realized that, we have to work towards larger coalitions. And like hearing about the lawsuit in Florida, that's fantastic, because a lot of people don't have that happen. A lot of people, have the same kind of sort of lawn conversion story that I do. They're like, I can't do this anymore. This is not sustainable. It's not regenerative. We've got insect population die off and all these things. I'm going to convert my lawn. And then they go and do it without looking at their local laws. And then the township or whoever comes in and then makes them bulldoze it. And there's so many stories of that. And so it's all about, but I feel like the more that we do this, the more that we're able to create a different vision of the future. And suddenly it's a place where the typical American lawn with no dandelions is not the norm, or British lawn or wherever. I'm in America, so I think about the American lawn, right? Suddenly that's something that we're moving away from. And I think that we're doing that, but laws and people are slow to change. And so seeing that as a spiritual activity, seeing that as something you do to honor and respect and revere the land is I think really powerful.
Oh, wonderful. Now, some comments on this. Another one from YouTube, which is lovely. Seven Serpents. Good morning, watching from Virginia there. Mark Cutler, lovely to have you in. Good morning, Dana. Kate, lovely Kate has come in on her farm, just got in after her chores. Amazing woman there. She's, Kate, she's certainly really excited about joining in this anyway. I'm going to, links to the cards. I'll bring that up in a moment. Next time Dana's talking, I'll bring up the website. And from the website, it's beautifully laid out. It'll take you to the cards, to the book, to the blog. It's all there. It's fantastic. Dana's made it very simple for everyone, which is fabulous. Australia, absolutely brilliant. If I was broadcasting this from Australia, we'd be starting at chapter 1, the July, I think. There. So we would be starting these summer solstice there. So that's the way you read it there. And yes, it's totally relevant, especially in Australia. There's so many similarities. You'll relate to it a lot. Donna's come in with something big here. Live in an area where lawns are not required. A desert, interesting situation. Wild, that's a different situation. Of course, it's funny enough. I suppose in some ways, Florida wasn't a desert, but goodness me, you certainly had the prehistoric wilderness, and you had sawgrass. You couldn't have proper lawn. You had stuff that would cut you up, but they still insisted. And everybody had sprinklers. It was madness. Sherry, good morning. Can't wait to read the book. Live in a historical village up there in Maine. So very similar to here. And gradually ridding of the practice. Now, I've got someone said, hey, Tracy here from Manchester as well. Lula's grandma, does that make any sense to anyone? Anyway, lovely to have you, Tracy, fantastic. Anyway, we'll move on. We're going on to chapter 7 now. And if I can get up my bits and pieces for chapter 7, being sort of reluctant. Now, the Equinox, our Earth Ambassadorship, community, and the broader work in the world, creating community groups, sharing your knowledge. And Dana, you start the chapter suggesting that the Earth Ambassadorship has to do with building communities and opportunities for people to learn and grow. And I'm pushing this all the time when people complain about governments and what they're doing. And fortunately, there are Facebook groups and other groups saying this as well. Forget the government. Let's see what we can do locally. Be a local voice. We relate to that here at Karakori, because before I went online due to the COVID with these Nature Folklore sessions, we had our Sunday meetup gatherings here. And at the autumn equinox, we had harvest gathering. Trying to get some pictures up for that. And the conversation always went through many of the topics you introduced here for the fall equinox. Permaculture, we talk about sustainability, practices, people sharing requests to help each other. And there'd be potlucks. You talk about potlucks and wonderful things. There you go. Someone announcing potluck with permaculture as well. And then sadly, I couldn't find any appropriate ones. We've got some beautiful kitchen foodie ones here. But that was when we went somewhere else. But that's the sort of thing with the potluck. People come along here. Absolutely fantastic way to share your skills and actually get to know each other. And the donations, it's lovely getting all these food donations, and we're trying everybody else's food. It's so amazing how food brings the community together in conversation, and then you start talking about what each other's doing. And it's a vital thing to do for community. And Dana, you talk about sharing a grove or a coven. Unfortunately, we couldn't be out there today, but we have our tree labyrinth here, the tree labyrinth garden amongst the labyrinth gardens here. And that's, we have, as you see by the round seating there, although people face out. I'll talk about that another time. But you also recommend the indulgence in bardic arts, and we love to do that here too. There should be something on that. There's you in doing some bardic arts, and there's Claire in our front room with her harps doing the same thing. So your next with this chapter is your thoughts about developing community and learning from each other through the social potluck and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So, again, vision for sustainable future requires, there's sort of this mindset maybe in some places of like a survivalist or a prepper being alone and I'm figuring out what to do so I can survive. And I really don't see that as the way we want to go, right? So, prior to industrialization and prior to maybe some of the specialization we've seen in the 19th and 20th centuries, people depended on each other. I learned this really extensively when I studied natural building at Strawbell Studio in Michigan. If you want to raise a barn or even just an outdoor kitchen or anything, the amount of people that is necessary to build a structure requires us to get along, right? It requires us to come together. And I think, again, we're in this predicament, this global predicament. Governments are saying all sorts of things, but the actual physical action has got to be with us. And even if governments are going to find ways of solving problems, it's up to us and our individual and local context to come together. And so, yeah. And when I was in Michigan, which is a lot of where I wrote this book, I moved back to Pennsylvania a couple of years ago. We had a grove and we had a permaculture meetup, and there was so much cross-pollination where people would come to the permaculture meetup and wander into the backyard and see the grove versus, or vice versa, right? See the grove and then be interested. And so I really started to see the synthesis between these different things. But yeah, getting people together, feeling like you're not alone. If you're going to want to convert your lawn to gardens, or you want to start a local buying club for food, all of those things, all of them require us to work together. And it's through finding those pieces of community that we can build larger movements. And then suddenly larger movements can really make powerful change. I kind of like to see it as like a river. each of us is maybe a tiny little tributary, and we're all moving into this larger river. So here in the United States, that would be the Mississippi, right? So I actually live next to a little stream called Penn Run, and that runs into a bigger stream, which runs into the Conemaugh, which runs into the Ohio, which runs into the Mississippi. And I might only be representing the little tiny Penn Run stream, but if all of us run together, now we're the Mississippi, and the Mississippi is unstoppable. So that's the way that I like to think about how do we bring about this change beyond our individual lives, and that's why that chapter's in there.
Oh, brilliant! I love the river reference there. I can relate to that, especially when we cover the water folklore here, and of course in the picture of you going kayaking, wondering if you were going to hit the Mississippi there anyway. So Kate here, to those who drive by my homestead, looks overgrown with tall weeds, but full of goat field. Yeah, it's absolutely wonderful, the pictures I've seen. Kate is literally part of the soil as it is anyway, and wonderful. And Breezy, oh goodness me, I must tell you, first time I met Breezy, I don't know when it was, 2006 or something like that. There was a great protest because there was a motorway, like a freeway, being put very close to Tara. It broke up the Rathloo, where they reckon Lou was buried, but it's kind of a fairy hill sliced in half of this motorway. So, and they were ignoring the fact that they could have reopened the motorway and just done up the road that was existing. So we had the harps for Tara, and we had this human harp that we formed in Tara, which was absolutely fascinating. I think it was 3,000 people. We formed a harp and saved Tara, and then there was no drones then. It was done with an aeroplane, I think. Anyway, yeah, it was aeroplane going over. And I met Beezy there. Now, the thing about Beezy that was wonderful, and it is relevant to this subject, what Beezy does, she bakes bread. And she's a fantastic baker, and she's done a bread book in very much the same approach as your sacred action. She goes through the wheel and relative to the kitchen and the bread and the sharing of bread, absolutely beautiful. And she goes around and she actually gives storytelling gigs with groups of people doing this. Absolutely wonderful woman up there in Donegal. So thank you for being here, Beezy, and thanks for your comment for enjoying joining this in. And Donna, book life, it's going to be really interesting. It certainly is, and you'll discover that soon, I'm sure. Good morning. Can't wait. Oh yeah, sure, we've had that. We've had you with that one. Fabulous. Now we better go on to chapter 8 here. Sawan, sustainable ritual tools, items, and objects. And I went straight into this. The great fascination, hands-on, very practical. Very important for this time is make your own smudging sticks. As this section here is a huge draw, and this is wonderful, Dana. You described this practice as cultivating more sacred and more sustainable relationship with the plants, and so of course smudging at Sawan. It's a wonderful time to really engross in your smudging because we've got the harvest of the herb plants that have dried out, however we dry them. So they should be abundant for us that grow and harvest herbs. And we're also becoming aware that the winter season's coming on. Sorry, Australia, this is in reverse of you. But we're aware of the winter's coming on. So we engage in blessings and calls for protection. And what I love is your incredible listing. You've got a fabulous listing of plants suitable for smudging and incense. We don't need white sage. And you go all about how to go about it. And you can have plants right in front of where you are, no matter where you live. And I love all the detailed instructions you have there, not only of the plants, but how to make smudging sticks. Absolutely wonderful. It's a favorite section of mine anyway. And I feel just that smudging section is worth the value of a book. Anyway, it's so detailed. It's a fabulous part. It's a favorite, as you can hear. So, yes, Sawan, your thoughts on Sawan there?
Sure. So, yeah. So when we think about, I always like to think about where does what I'm consuming come from? whether that's, we've already talked about that with food and other things, especially if I'm going to be using it as like a smoke clearing ritual, as a cleansing ritual, as part of my ritual. And the way that I talk about it in the book is that if I buy a smudge stick from a store, I don't, and there's no information, it's just there and I buy it. I don't know what I'm buying. I don't know if I'm buying an exploitation of indigenous people, where if I'm buying, I'm really concerned with the wild, like a lot of the wildcrafted label is really problematic here in the United States. I live in a place where we used to have American ginseng. We don't anymore because it's all gone, because it's all been stripped from the land and sold to China, wildcrafted, right? So bringing those spiritual supplies of any kind back into our own hands is something to do. And honestly, the smoke clearing sticks, the smudge sticks, it's really, really easy. Like if you have conifer trees, like I'm sitting right here, this is behind me is a Norway spruce, which is not a native tree here, but it was planted by the people who had this land before me. And like, there is so much that I can get from there. Incense, I can use the tips for making beautiful spruce tip salve. I can make smudges from the branches, and this one tree is just so productive. And then if you go to the front of the house, I'm sitting in the shade in the back of the house, we have our garden full of mugwort and artemisia and just so many things, garden sage. And so yes, there's no reason for us to go and purchase these kinds of things. We don't know where they're from. We don't know the energy of them. They might have really problematic colonial style implications, and especially here in the US, that's something we really have to think about. I'm a white person, I have to really pay attention to this. And so sort of reclaiming and realigning with just what is in nature is something that this is Acorn, don't mind her, she's decided to join us. Is something that we can do. And we can do it with friends. I've taught like a smoke clearing stick workshop. I've taught it for years, and it's actually one of the most all-time popular posts on my blog is how to make these and how to create them and the lists and everything. And it's not hard. Anybody can do it. It doesn't require any kind of real, artistic skill or anything. And you can, with small amounts of harvesting in the fall, you can make enough for yourself to make various kinds of incenses. And what I really like about it is then suddenly what energy was put in. You can make an offering to that tree. You can ask permission to that tree or that plant. You can offer gratitude. You can create a whole ritual surrounding how to create this. And so suddenly now, when you light that and you burn it for whatever purpose you're using it for, whether that's, just incense or setting the space or clearing yourself, now you have complete control over it, and it was sustainable. And you're not exploiting anybody or anyone else's tradition to do it. And so there's just so many reasons to really take a close look at the consumption that we have with our spiritual supplies. And it's fun. Like you can get really interesting combinations that are meaningful to you, that are tied to your specific practice and your specific ecosystem. So yes, by all means, create away.
And the other thing as well, not in the book, but I've done it sometimes, is you don't necessarily have to tie up the plants in advance. You can actually grab a bunch of plants and set fire to them. I mean, it's that simple. It's not a complicated thing. Tina, naturally, who is very much a plant person, loving the topic of making your own smudge sticks. And I'm sure you do already, Tina, don't you? You must say. I wouldn't believe it if you said you didn't. So many herbs around, and to have your book, I bet you will be a great fan of that book. And Suzanne, I've wanted to make my own smudge sticks for years. Now you know how simple it is. But in Dana's book, it just draws up ideas. Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, wow, you can use that plant. You can do it this way. It's phenomenal. And I learned a lot from that section myself. And I've been making smudge sticks for years, but there was a lot of fresh stuff there. Absolutely brilliant. Messy holding act, a wonderful idiot filter to win-win there. And Kate, there we go. She's talking about the homegrown there. Yeah, this is, absolutely fabulous. So we can move on to chapter 1. We're going to the chapter 1. Or in Australia, that's chapter 5, isn't it? Winter solstice, the ethics of care and open heart spaces. Now, winter solstice, Yule, Christmas, all those good things. I'm going to try and get some pictures up for this. There are times when people close to us are very much in their thoughts. And the whole gifting thing by tradition, obviously it was to ensure people by tradition, it was to ensure nobody went without during the winter. So we gave gift food, things that we had of excess, food, clothes, fuel for fire. I loved it when I was a youngster, when someone would turn up with some logs at Christmas time. That was such a huge present, and foods that, you know, spicy foods, and that we wouldn't even think of getting, all those lovely trees. Very popular. I think people have forgotten that. And in this chapter, you point out how modern industrial aligned culture has lost that level of care, thoughtfulness, and compassion. And you've pointed out that we seem to have lost care towards each other, as well as lost care for the land. And at this point, you flow away from the immediate and home and family compassion into subjects like the damage to the environment, fracking, for instance. And you talk about us pursuing heady actions that deaden our minds and hearts. And there was a meme I saw this morning that I thought really summed this up. Please don't forget to close all the tabs in our heads. I thought that was a pretty good one. If I can, I'm trying to remove that. There we go. And so you talk about compassion fatigue, and you say that we don't talk enough about compassion fatigue. Our fatigue from bombardment of demands placed upon us. And that meme really fits into that, doesn't it? You know, that's like our demands. Just close all those tabs. And this is part of the industrial cultures. And you speak and write about us reacting to becoming numb to the practice of care. Even with care, if there's something we have to be caring about, we brush it aside. We put our elderly people into homes to get them out of their lives. And you explain how care connects us back to people and all life, and how it's essential. Care is so essential for sacred action. So please, yes, do talk about that.
Yeah, so this actually starts the book. And I've had a lot of people ask me, well, why are we starting in the winter solstice? And why do you start with care? And to me, this is the foregrounding of everything. So here in the book, I have this section 3 ethics for sacred action, which are essentially my take on permaculture design's 3 ethics, which are earth care, people care, and fair share. And to me, a lot of paganism doesn't have a distinct ethical system. Like in Druidry, we really don't have one that we teach. Like we say, oh, we love nature, nature is good, and that's something that all Druids agree. But coming up with a ethical system that can guide our actions and that we can meditate on, that we can reflect on, that can be part of ritual, is really, to me, important. And there's a lot of work out there that really speaks to this. Like in this chapter, I drew really heavily on Joanna Macy's Coming Back to Life, and also on Wendell Berry's Unsettling of America, 2 books that make very, very strong arguments for the nature of care. And I'll go back to the lawn thing, and I'll go back to growing food. So, you know, my neighbor down the street who is dumping chemicals all over his lawn or dumping chemicals all over his cornfield is not engaging in that from a place of care. He's engaging in that from a place of profit, where, you know, we have, like, because of some of the growing that happens around here, like there's a lot of cabbage growing, so we have these terrible cabbage moths. And just yesterday we were trying to figure out how can we grow kale and cabbage without spraying everything, which we're not going to do because we're rooting our gardening practice in care. So ultimately this is what it comes down to. It's can we care? And I think, like, the pandemic is such a good example of this. Like, if there was any question in your mind about how the culture reacts to things and whether or not people, you know, here in North America, especially here in the United States, this was a really tough time for us because people were forced to go into jobs when they were afraid. And there was just such a lack of care and compassion that took place that I feel like if we're going to create this regenerative vision for the future, care has got to be the number one thing that we think about, not only for ourselves and practicing self-care, but for the earth and for people. And the other piece of that, the fair share piece of that, is really about taking only what we need. and redistributing what we don't. And it's those kinds of thinking and those kinds of actions that allow us to create not only a sustainable relationship with the land, but a regenerative one, and a regenerative one with each other. And so, yeah, to me, that is the foundation of everything. And those three ethics, those three practices can really become mantras or spiritual meditations that you really think about, and that you say, when I'm going to make a decision, how can I make it that includes earth care and people care and fair share? So yeah, and that those things weave throughout the entire book, and that's why they start here.
Great. Now, Seven Serpents has pointed out how great it is to start in the winter. It makes sense. And of course, in the Northern Hemisphere, that's our dormant time. And yes, start from beginning then, because it's the debris from the year before actually being manifested for the spring to come. Next chapter is obviously going to be Imbolc. But the Australian viewers are going to be absolutely delighted, because to them, we're this is we're actually in there. This is where they start right now. Now I have to bring Gary's here. Gary Brannigan just logged in. Wonderful man who's great encouragement for the preservation of the holy wells here. And he wanted to know about the book. I will do this for now, but I'm actually going to bring more full screen things, sacred actions there, and living the wheel of the earth through end-centered sustainable practices. And I'll put up links for that and a lot more information before we leave here for sure. But thanks for joining in, Gary. And I hope you will watch the archive, because you'll enjoy that. The water references, we're going to have more water references very soon. But I think you'll find the whole thing fascinating, because Gary's very much an eco person. So I'm glad he's great that he is aboard here. Tina, yes, I do my own great topic, the smudging. Just bundle your inner cell, and it brings in the light of clearance. Mary Dwyer, who's not from far away here, is applauding. Lovely that you've joined in. And please show a photo of your smudging sticks in her book again. Yes, I should have done. Yeah, there we go. Dana's she's got her lovely line drawings of her smudge sticks. Thanks very much for that. Absolutely brilliant. And Sarah was saying never got around to it. We're going to get around to it now. Fabulous. And Gary's put up a heart there. Thank you very much, Gary. So let us move on now. Imbolc. Yes, Imbolc. We're coming out of the winter now into a wonderful Imbolc stuff. And the excuse me. The one thing that Dana again was now almost like a surprise with the lawn in Lunasadh, yet it makes absolute sense. And she's coming to Imbolc with the oak knowledge. Understand Imbolc wisdom through the oak knowledge and reskilling. And I absolutely love this one. And you've written, because the fact that you've written emphasis on oak knowledge, what the oak tree sees, because at our Imbolc Nature Folklore sessions, we do talk a lot about oak, which some people may find surprising. But we have the strong relationships with Bridget and her oaks, Kildare. And one of the stories is how the oaks attract lightning. They actually attract lightning more than any other tree. Excuse me, getting froggy here. The smoldering oak tree, it actually becomes a so sacred gift of fire, certainly to ancients, and of the flame. And we also have stories of how the oak's strength represents getting through winter, its long, deep roots, and no matter what storms and wind comes along, the oak is still standing there when everything is falling around, and that's the wisdom, is being able to stand your ground firm. Wonderful for the Imbolc and the representation that you have to stand your ground in all the things that Dana is saying in the sacred actions. Sometimes it takes a bit of bravery. I do refer to oak knowledge in your book as druidry. And I first think of your passion for being a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, affectionately known as OBODs, by many. I'm not sure if we got any OBOB people here today. We sometimes do. And you suggest that ancient Druidry as being a combined study and practice, and the acquired knowledge of working with nature, as well as astronomy and mathematics, and also law. And I assume you're meaning the Breton law there, which is something I'm very passionate about, or whatever the Breton law was before medieval and scribing times. And also it's about understanding healing plants, divination, and the bardic arts. And I've shown pictures of all that along. And so sometimes I'm even tempted to rename these Sunday afternoons as oak folklore instead of nature folklore, but I'm going to stick as it is. Now, your entire oak knowledge plus reskilling are absolutely delightful. And now I'm putting a piece from your page here. I've already said this, the challenge of, this is where the oak, the deep root of the oak comes in. So I'm repeating that as well. Anyway, the oak, Imbolc and oak, I absolutely love it. So chat away about that. I just love this subject.
Sure. So when we think about our modern lives, just the daily grind, right? Most of us don't know how to produce even the most basic needs, right? We don't know how to produce our own food, our own clothing, our own shelter, purify water, create fire. And so there's a big movement globally called reskilling. And the idea behind it is that we build a skill set, right? And maybe it's a basic skill set of some of those things I just described. But we do it in a way that's sustainable. So for example, here, we're on electric. Now we have solar panels, so, but if I'm able to learn how to cook over the fire and have a little fire outside of my house, I'm not consuming that resource, right? I'm not consuming electricity. If I learn how to make my own smoke clearing sticks, my own smudge sticks, I'm not consuming that. And so really, when we think about a lot of the sustainable action, it is skill-based, it's knowledge-based, it's learning whatever it is you want to learn and finding the community that can teach you. And part of the reason I have this chapter here and I have it tied to Imbolc is because traditionally, when we think about the winter months were times of reading and study and reflection. They were not times where you were, building a garden or whatever. And so it made a lot of sense to me to say, well, if you're going to pick up a new skill or you're going to start studying something, Imbolc is actually a really good time to do that. It's new beginnings. We have new, it's sort of almost like the beginning of the light coming back into the world. So what a great time to say, I think I'm going to learn how to carve my own spoons or whatever the skill is. But a lot of this is rooted in the knowledge that we once had as humans and the knowledge that we don't have anymore. And so thinking through that idea and finding the things that you're really excited about learning and you're passionate about learning and building that skill set is really an important part of sacred action. And there's no reason that it can't all be tied to your spiritual practice. So learning how to cook over the fire, learning how to, we're actually working on an earth oven here right now, using cobs, clay, sand, and straw. And, learning how to bake with the earth oven, just using the earth, all of those and learning how to build it, right? There's a natural building skill there, learning how to do all of that. And there's such a joy. It's almost infectious. Like when you start learning one thing, you want to learn more and cultivating that curiosity and then cultivating that towards various kinds of creative practice. So that's really what this chapter is all about. It's sort of opening up the doors and providing the information so you can go out and learn all the things I didn't cover in the book, because the book is only so long and there's only so many things I could cover.
Ah, great. Now, as Sherry was saying about that, we're sticking with oak tree. A badger near the oak tree is brilliant. And your illustrations there, absolutely fabulously inclusive of the wildlife. And of course, we're going into overtime because I don't want Dana to go away. And I'm sure some of you will be feeling that as well. But we're going on to the next chapter, the spring equinox. Time of spring cleaning, disposing of the disposable mindset, as Dana puts it. And this includes a section of inner and outer problems. It's a huge chapter on consumerism and waste, trying to bring up some pictures on this because of something this reminds me of. And because as a child, this equinox, spring equinox, vernal equinox time, was a time of jumble sales. It's a bit like the yard sales and garage sales in the USA, but this was raising money for charity, churches, Sunday school groups, scouts, guides, that type of thing. And they're being very civilized. It used to be quite a bit of a war. Now that's, as I say, this is a time to get rid of a load of stuff. This is not really what you point out in the book. But we end up getting rid of stuff when we go along to the jumble sales, yard sales, and buy a load of other people's throw out stuff. But you commenced the chapter with us having an obsession with stuff, not really of hoarding other people's cast-offs, but our quest to establish and maintain self-image. Our cars, paintings, art, furniture, watches, fashion trends move very fast, perfumes. And these days it's the devices, you know, I've got a better upgrade than you sort of conversation. Just that prestige all the time. And I believe you define this very well when you describe that we buy things for others when we want to demonstrate affection. We buy things for ourselves when we want to solve problems. And that's me. I do that. I'm guilty. And we buy entertainment to cure boredom. Well, with me, I tend to turn to entertainment sometimes as a lazy way of getting ideas. So maybe that's a good thing. But you go into some interesting chapters about waste and how it slides into how we accumulate waste without, not only externally with what's around us, but in our inner worlds, and how this inner waste cultivates emotional and mental challenges, and others identify that as illness. Now, more fascinating are demonstrations of how our culture of waste is actually framed into our language. And I think the one amazing example you give, and it's one that always disgusts me, and I think with a lot of people watching today, is this whole thing of talking about yard waste. I try to, for instance, with weeding, I say, no, I'm not weeding. I'm either thinning or grazing. But yard waste as a disposable, I mean, look at this. This is something that really is so disgusting. All that resource there, vital resource for our soil sustainability in front of that sort of manicured lawn situation. I got, you know, that's what you're talking about. So some words with you about that, Dana.
Yeah. So in permaculture design, one of my favorite principles is waste as a resource, and really thinking about how do we, one, not produce waste if we can't. So produce no waste is another principle. So those two are really framing this chapter. And you know, I think it's interesting. So, you know, back a long time ago, after September 11th happened, and after, you know, the entire United States was in this just place, and really the whole world was in shock about what happened, what did the president say? He said, go buy, please go consume. He literally told Americans after we had this national tragedy to go buy stuff. And that's happened throughout, you know, it's nothing new, right? And to me, the materialism and waste is one of the major challenges we have. You know, it blows my mind around here how much, even for people who don't have a lot of money, how much waste is accumulated. And that's just not necessary. There are ways of doing all of these things differently. Yard waste being a great example. I have lots of examples of like composting and, you know, finding ways of ethically getting rid of like excess stuff in this chapter. And again, it comes back to the as above, so below, as within, so without. If our lives are full of waste and of things that, you know, that break and we throw out, then what is that doing to our inner lives? And how is that impacting our spiritual practices? And I found that once I was able to eliminate a lot of sort of junk and stuff from my life, ethically, I mean, donating it, finding new homes, repurposing it, and also really monitoring what comes in, that really gave me a clarity of thought. And I've talked to a lot of people who have that. I mean, this is also part of why we see like the tiny house movement and minimalism and these sorts of things, is because a lot of people are starting to push against this idea that consumption solves all of our problems. It doesn't. All it does is make us unhappy and makes us consume more. So I'm kind of at the point where, do I need something new? And I look on my land and I say, can I make it? Is that the first thing? If I can't make it, can I source it ethically? And do I need it? And that simple practice can really align us deeply with the earth. The spirits of the land pay attention to what we do. The spirits of nature see us. They see our daily lives. If they see us engaging in ethical practices for what we need and identifying what we need and doing that in a way that is honoring them, that is going to reflect in the work we do. That's going to reflect in how they interact with us. And that's a big part of all of this. And, you know, if we think about the entirety of materialist and consumer culture, it's all stuff-based, and finding ways of even removing ourselves from that in small ways, I think is really powerful and meaningful.
Fabulous. And we're going to move on to chapter 4 now. This is going to complete the circle of the year in your book to this present time, and sacred actions in our homes to complete this. And you've included one of my favorite topics, and I was saying to Gary, this is coming up, water and water usage.
Yeah.
Now, before getting into that subject, you do serve some lovely home tips and suggestions that might seem a little strange for me, but they are tips that needed to be in the book somewhere. But getting back to water, and you mentioned the increasing challenges of drought. Now, even here in Ireland, which is known worldwide for its seemingly continuous soft rains, you come here in May, most years anyway, and you'll hardly see a drop of rain here. Instead, what you'll see is thousands of pink Irish people going around in a panic because of a fear of potential drought here. And also giving out about how there's all this watering the garden that suddenly needs doing. And at the same time in May, it's dry, but we also get late frosts as well. So that's playing hell with our blossoms. So challenging time here. But in this chapter, you also go back to lawns and how their upkeep actually needs water that is actually starving the wild plants, even starving the trees probably. And how some wild plants are actually becoming extinct because of this lawn culture. And you also provide some wise and helpful tips for keeping water localized. And I got a couple of pictures on this because this is the thing that's taking off in Ireland big time, is the water butts and saving water. And it's just one way that we're actually paying attention, and we're seeing, you know, we're being mindful of water and what we've got available to us. And you serve some very helpful tips about water, including cleaning and sanitizing as well. So your thoughts on that, as on obviously water and just the whole being aware of what's around us, and suggestions, water and water usage and our sacred actions in our home generally. Yeah, just fire away with that.
Sure. So yeah, chapter 4 really focuses on like everyday life in our homes and thinking about those typical things like cooking, cleaning, drinking, showering, you know, just and again, this is a book about how we live every day and how we bring that sacred action into our lives, how we think about regeneration, how we think about our nature spirituality is part of that. And so to speak to specifically to the water, right now, half of the United States is in drought. We just had the hottest, we just had this terrible heat wave. And, you know, I think that these issues are going to be becoming more and more central as we move forward. So the question is, right now, I put perfectly clean drinking water, you know, in my toilet, and then I flush it. I do go into some radical composting in the book. I put perfectly good drinking water into my bathtub, and then I take a bath, and then I send it down the drain and into a septic system or into a municipal waste system where it gets treated like toxic chemicals, right? So what if I instead sent that waste into my garden? Or what if I paid attention to collecting it or creating a garden system? So I'll give you a really good example here. We have ducks and we have a garden and we live on this hill. And the whole property is downhill. And so what we decided to do was put our ducks above our garden and then build what in the book is described and in permaculture is described as a swale. So we essentially created this big ditch that when we dump the duck, because if anybody has ducks, you know how messy they are. They're muddy ducks, they make mud anywhere, and every day they require a new pool of water. So we dump the pool of water, and rather than just sending it, you know, wherever, we actually dump it into the swale that's at the beginning of our garden, and that's where we grow cabbage and celery and other plants that really like a wet environment. So we've essentially created a system where every bit of water we put into our duck enclosure and that's used by our ducks then goes into our garden and is turned into a resource rather than waste. And, we could have put the duck enclosure anyway, but because we were thinking about produce no waste, waste as a resource, how do we catch and store water, and how do we catch and store other energy, we ended up creating that really holistic system. That same system also has ducks. The ducks enclosure also has all of our blueberry patch, because that way we can prevent the birds from eating them when there's plenty of other food for wildlife. And so it's just a really neat, you start thinking about, how do I create these just daily practices that are waste producing and turn them into a resource? And there's lots of ways to do that. And I love the duck example, because I think it's a nice example of just how, we looked at a challenge that we had. Okay, the ducks produce a lot of water. We have to change it every day. What can we do to harness this water? What can we do to make it a resource? And that's kind of the thinking there. And then, of course, when I dump that duck water, which I did this morning before I came onto the show, I feel good about it. I'm like, now I'm watering my plants. I'm not just dumping it, down a drain or something. And, that's what I mean by sacred actions. It's these little things that suddenly make a big, meaningful change over time. That really, and then I meditate on it, and I think about it, and then maybe I do some ritual with my ducks, and it's all great. So yeah, I'd say that's there's a ton of stuff in that particular chapter that really, that's a long chapter.
I just love that, how you brought it from water to ducks. Absolutely perfect. And so we're back with chapter 5, the summer solstice, food and nourishment. We've gone full circle. The one question: who's Alfred?
Alfred. So Alfred was a dear friend of mine who passed away, and actually got me on this path of Druidry. And he was a very meaningful person in my life. And after he passed, I think his passing taught me the meaning of living every day fully, and really living. It's when somebody dies tragically when they're young, it kind of makes you wonder where would they be when they get older. And so I've always tried to live my life in a way that maybe that's part of why my introduction was the way it was, right? I try to live my life in a way that would honor his memory, and maybe live fully and generously, and not waste my life, because who knows when it'll be gone. And so Alfred was my closest friend when I was in my 20s that passed. And so I really wanted to dedicate this to him, because I think that this is something that he would have really liked to see.
Lovely. I say that because the beginning of the book, Dana, she tributes the book to Alfred right at the beginning. So lovely to know that we now know who Alfred is. And I love your conclusion of you advising us to grow where we are planted, just like the mighty dew of the oak. And then you sign off suggesting a personal ritual to honor our life journey, how important that is. And you have an excellent listing of follow-up books to read. But me not being very connected to books, embarrassingly, also advise, like you do, is keep trying things. Keep your hands and the rest of you connected to your land and landscape. Do not just be a paper or a white cloak druid. Your druid cloak needs to go into the laundry sometimes, I feel. So I got some more comments on this, and one is very potent, if I can find it, because you recommend books, and there's Kate recommending Robin Kimmer's Braiding Sweetgrass. And at this point, we have a lovely Irish author who's also an OBOD person, Luke Eastwood. He actually has, if you did a Google search for Dana's book, you might come up with his book, because he's got one called The Druid Garden. I haven't got the cover for that. We'll have to have him on for that sometime. But it's 100% gardener's approach, and it's like a wonderful practical gardening book, how to, for a complete beginner, how to start a garden. So a lovely book as well, another one. So it's wonderful. Anyone, get your questions in now, because we're going to get near the close. So any questions for Dana? And thank you so much. It's been an extreme pleasure sharing this book, and I better get a picture up for Gary and the others that were late. This is what we've been talking about. Sacred actions, living the wheel of the year through the earth-centered sustainable practices. Again, I'll bring this up to get a copy of your book. Probably the quick and easy thing to do is get to the druidsgarden.com website, and it's a lovely interface there. So easy to get to what you want to. You can get to the book, and you can get to Dana's card. You can get to her blog. Absolutely. That's all you need to know. But if not, if you're on Facebook, you've got the Druid Garden on Facebook, lovely for photographs and personal tidbits from Dana. Or if you don't remember that, just put out Druid Garden and that'll get you to where you need to be at Druid Garden. But if you've taken just that down, you've done very well. Come back. The druidgarden.com is fabulous now to get that off. Comments, Gary. There's Gary saying, whoops, he said something and went away. Getting a copy of this myself. Fabulous. Great. Thank you very much for your support there, Gary. And please ask Dana some questions now before we close this up. But I trust you've enjoyed our time with Dana O'Driscoll. Absolutely lovely book. Again, the Sacred Actions. I've still got plenty to read of it. And it's something I'll always be going back to for a reference. Oh, how does Dana do it? It's really lovely for that. So as I mentioned near the start of the sessions, Nature Folklore brought to you by our subscribers. So thank you all being subscribers. Coming up, we got coming up in Nature Folklore sessions. We should have some pictures for you next week. I had fun with this last year. And I think we're going to get Tony Cookson in on this, which is great. Lovely storyteller. Let's get to where I am here. Let's knock this down for a minute. There we go. Ashlings and the Green Man. Discovering the Ashlings and the Green Man, which is applying folklore to exploring the deep passions that inspire our poetry, our writing, music, crafts, dancing, and drama. And folklore of stories, the Ashlings, that arouses passion in men, the Ashlings, but not to leave out the women. We have the Green Man, and both have been dynamic inspirations of profound writing, arts and crafts, and really dramatic lives. And the Green Man folklore, if you didn't watch last year, I'll remind you anyway, is actually a mythology and a folklore that's not as old as you think. But I will include the folklore that led up to the Green Man. The Green Man actually came out in the 1930s, and I'll explain why. But anyway, I briefly mentioned earlier on the 25th, it's our Garland Sunday. I just got a woman with garlands there, but we will be going into the bilberry. It is really a terrific bilberry collecting day, especially around here. The hills around here, the brick leaves, Carrickeel, absolutely fabulous time for that. But we're already creeping towards harvest time. So on this Sunday, I'll be sharing traditions that have faded away. And then 1st of August, it's our first harvest folklore time. And there we go. Again, we'll bring the potatoes back up. But the theme of this day is First Harvest Gathering, and I invite you to join me live and send pre-recorded video clips. This is going to be one of these potluck sessions where we have your poems, your stories, and of what Lunasadh Lama, First Harvest, what does it mean to you? So get your thinking caps on, poetry, stories, and either be live, ask to be live, like Dana's done absolutely wonderfully today, this afternoon, or the pre-recorded clips, as you've seen I've done in past. You said bits of clips and photos. I'll knit them together and we'll present them in a way. So how do you celebrate? What are you grateful for at first harvest time? And this reflects on the stuff that Dana's been talking about. Because this is when we're aware that we're first harvest, abundant times coming up. And I know it's been colder here than average in Ireland, hotter everywhere else, but colder in Ireland. But there must be something you're very grateful for at this time. So write it down, poems, stories, and contact me with what you have. Last chance for questions, everyone, and last comments. And there's Sam, absolutely love Dana's writing. Kate saying something here. Oh, Shell, been applying Druidic practices on our farm for several years. Croon's Farm, wonderful, rewarded, prolific oak grove, good for you. Dana's book should be here tomorrow. Yeah, I know, Dana, a lot. As soon as I announced that we got you on, people started ordering the book to actually do their homework, see what you're going to be talking about. So it's been popular already, which is fabulous. Dana, you have ducks. Do you have other livestock? What others about sacred actions in relation to your livestock? It was the question there.
Do you want me to answer that question?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yes, fire ahead.
The reason I just muted myself for a little while is because my guinea fowl started going crazy. So yeah, we have 4 different kinds of birds here. We have ducks, which I already talked about. We have geese, we have chickens, and we have guinea fowl. And each of them sort of what we work with them all holistically. You know, they mostly free range. Sometimes they have to go into the hawk. The geese actually help us with keeping so we have portions. We've converted a lot of the lawn. We have about 1.5 acres that was lawn we got here, and the rest is forested. And the geese actually help us. We only have to mow 2 or 3 times a year because the geese actually keep all the grass clipped. And they convert that grass into eggs, which is great. The chickens help with bugs in the garden. So do the ducks. And here in Western Pennsylvania, we have very serious ticks. And so we have the guineas helping us with the tick population. And we do a lot of spiritual work with the animals. That's a big part of sort of thinking about, because we have a homestead here, thinking about the homestead as an integrated system. And how does everybody have a role and a part? And how can we honor all of those journeys? I also save the feathers for various kinds of spiritual supplies and sustainable, give them away to other people who are using them for crafts. And yeah, it's interesting because when you look at a lot of these books on like regenerative agriculture and things like that, bringing animals into any system where you are growing things actually can improve the soil. There's a really interesting documentary on returning wolves to Yellowstone and how it like changed because it made the herds move around more. So I think there's so much that you can do to integrate animals. Another thing, the chickens, we give them all of our food scraps, which they convert into eggs. And then we recycle the eggshells. Either we put them back in the garden or we give them back to the chickens. So there's just like, when you're thinking about how do you create a holistic system where you can produce no waste and you can live sustainably, the animals here are a big part of that. And you might hear my guinea fowl in the background. They've decided they're honking. They're like, it's time for me to be out.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there's so it's like, how do I apply those same principles of earth care, fair share, people care to that equation?
I'm jealous because Gary says he's watched the session today from the Botanic Gardens in Dublin. Absolutely beautiful place. I wish I could have broadcasted from there. We've actually got the sun just come out now. The rain's finished. A shame I didn't have the tent up, but anyway, we've had a fabulous time, I believe, and Tina Rock has come up with something. Conscience on water waste, boiler steamed cabbage, boiling eggs, water goes to the plants, all this great stuff. Laundry, definitely, that's a short wash cycle, all these things. Being mindful and aware of your actions, and I know you are, Tina. You're a huge example of that. Been applying. Oh, we've had Shell here. Davine has just come on board, and you definitely enjoy the archive of this. Lovely that you've said hello, and yeah. So thank you so much. You've been absolutely delightful, Dana. An amazing guest, and we are heading into the longest nature folklore session we've done, I think, but it was well worth it. And you've absolutely been so fabulous in your presentation and the Sacred Actions book. And everyone who's watching this, perhaps you're watching it this evening, this has been the practice through the summer. And why not? I'm on at 2 o'clock because that's when our internet is best. If I tried doing this in the evening, we don't have enough internet to cope with this. But if you're watching later this evening and through the week, which most people seem to be doing now, please still keep the comments going. I will return. Dana may return from time to time, answer your comments. She did post the link to a book. I'll put that up when we've finished as well, so you can get straight through to it. Subscribe, of course, if you're on YouTube. There's the YouTube bell. I'm not sure if Facebook has one. I always forget. Anyway, if you do hit those bells, they remind you of the next Nature Folklore session for the next Sunday. So really, is there any last moment question? Because really, I suppose we are closing up. I don't want to close up, but we have to. Everyone, please. Thank you, Dana. Thank you so much for this. And everyone, please, let's get himself lined up properly here. And another flash of the book. well, come on, flash up. No, it's there we go. Oops, flash off on again, and where you can find all the links and to support the show. There we go. There, that helps. They get us on as well, and so. All right, I better close this up, and I'm just trying to find everybody enjoy a wonderful, safe week, full of all your wonder, inspirations, and your enchantments. So until next Sunday, do play well and be safe and be mindful and enjoy your sacred actions. So from Dana and I, it's bye-bye. Thank you so much.